But generally, today I'm going to be talking about draft signals and trying to take a small peek into the draft data from 17 Lens and see how that draft data can be converted to knowledge that you can use while drafting and how to use the newest feature of 17 Lens, which is the draft stream. I don't know if you know, but right now, if you go to your game history, if you are currently drafting, you can actually press the current draft and it will automatically update. So you can see some data in the browser while you're drafting on Arena, and you can get some data out of it, which might help you to read the signals. Good evening, Arkline. How are you doing? So obviously now that I'm on full screen on my computer and I am on Twitch to read the chat on my phone, I have no idea what time it is. Can someone give me a time, please? I want to start like maybe 3 minutes after 10 so that people have time to pop in so they don't miss the first slides, because then I'm going to be explaining the bit of the basics of the draft signals. Okay, 6 o'clock on the spot in Brazil. That means it's 10 o'clock on the spot here. So let's wait a couple of minutes and we can start. But basically, I did a couple of analysis recently on. I was actually starting to look at what cards wheel and at what ratio. Maybe I will be talking about it next week in a bit brief seminar. But today I'm going to talk about signals, because while I was doing the analysis for what wheels, I just figured out actually cards disappear from the packs at different rates, and some cards are better as signals than others, and some are quite poor as draft signals. And from that simple idea, I came up to this presentation. It's not going to be like massively complicated. I'm not doing any Bayesian statistics. Some might be disappointed that I'm not. It's going to be rather, hopefully, straightforward, and I'm going to approach it with time, and then we can actually. Yeah, it's sort of based on the ALSA variance, but a bit more. So basically, I'm going to make it more complicated just to come back to ALSA as the best measure for that. And you'll see how I'm getting there. But yeah, there is the ALSA delta is the good way of approaching it. But at the same time, I put the idea of what a draft signal is and when the draft signal is actually meaningful and when the draft signal is a bit useless. So there's going to be a bit of complication there. Hopefully not too much. Because of course a signal can be quite strong and quite meaningful, but completely useless for your draft if it only involves you knowing something about one person. I mean, it's not completely useless. It is not as good as a signal that covers a bit more seats. So basically, we're going to look at the sort of optimization between how many seats does a signal cover, how strong is the signal, and based on that, see what you can actually quite easily use in your draft. Because obviously, if you have pack 1, pick 7, bomb rare, and green, you know that no one is drafting green. But how often is that going to happen in real life? If it happens once every 1,000 drafts, it's not a very useful signal for you because you will never see it. So in this aspect, it won't be useful. On the other hand, if you see a good rare in the pack 2, in as pick 2, it only covers one player, so it's not amazingly important. Right. I think we are roughly 3 minutes into the stream, so I might slowly go to the actual slide, but maybe start with the starting picture. This is one of the most annoying possible draft signals you can get. Someone during the draft telling you that what is this still doing in the pack? It is a signal. It is an illegal signal because you shouldn't be talking while you're drafting, or at least not about draft. You can talk about shopping or whatnot. It also gives you very little information except for the fact that someone evaluates something much higher than someone else that was passing them the pack. And it's a rubbish signal. I hate when people do that, and hopefully will not catch myself doing it during the drafts. I like silent drafts, although some banter, some chat is fine, but competitive drafts are perfect. Signal, draft, pass. look at the cards. 30 seconds passed, so you have to actually focus on it and think about it. Signal, pass. There's nothing more perfect than the second day on the GP draft. Never drafted on the Pro Tour, unfortunately, as I am too sucky to get to that level in draft. But competitive drafts and high level competitions are just the perfection. Right. Without further ado, so I started, what is a signal? Because if we're talking about signals, let's go to the definitions of signals. And I didn't go much further than Wikipedia, but I found two of those nice definitions. First of all, it's a function that conveys information about a phenomenon, which is from the information theory, a bit boring, but quite telling. I mean, we learned from that a signal conveys some information about something. In our case, it conveys information about a draft state. Now, second definition was actions done by an organism. This is a biological definition, and of course, I'm going to go biology. I am a biologist, so I'm much more keen to listen to the biological definition of signal, and it's actions done by an organism to alert other organisms. And lucky for us, Magic players are still considered organisms. We still didn't build a Karn machine that will play Magic with us. Well, Sparky might be, but Sparky doesn't draft much. To alert other organisms. And this is a decent definition for what's happening in the draft. In the draft, you pick cards and you alert other organisms that you did something if they are careful enough to read the signals. So let's move on from what is draft signal. And here there are some of mine definitions, or my random ramblings, as I mentioned. First of all, draft signal is a mix of unwillingly given information and willingly sent signal. We have to distinguish those two because part of them is linked, you know what, I'm going to remove the headphones as they don't give me anything as I don't have the game playing in the background. But first thing is we send signals whether we want it or not. Because if you're picking a particular color pair, you're going to naturally deplete the pool of the cards from that color, and therefore at some stage of the draft, someone might see it as a signal. And this is unwilling because you don't necessarily want to inform people what you're drafting, but there is no work around it. If you want to draft cards, you need to send this kind of information around. Second of all, some signals are sent willingly. If you're having this booster pack and it's late and there is one white card and you're drafting white, sometimes you just pick the white card even though there are better cards in other colors because you want to send signal, look, stay away from white, I'm in white, I don't want you to move in white late in the game. I will gladly give you those better cards because I'd rather you be having a slightly better deck but not competing with my deck because I'd rather have a bigger card pool to build my stuff. Now, second thing is that signal during draft is our perception based on intuition most of the time because we don't have time to look at the data during the draft, especially when it's on paper. So it's purely based on our perception. And of course, that brings problems because our perception is not perfect. We make mistakes in our perceptions. That's why eyewitnesses are not very reliable source of information. And our intuition might be wrong. We might evaluate things differently than the rest of the table. And based on that, we might read into something that is not a signal. Okay, cards are dancing bees. Yes, cards are basically dancing bees. And we are just the queen that sends them around happily. That's true. It's called allopathy, Carva MTG. Hi, Diogo. How are you doing? So, to go back to the talk, signals are ambiguous. And what do I mean by that is that if what we read as a signal, because in the end the signal is based on our perception of it, might not be a signal at all, which means we are not 100% sure whether something is or is not a signal, except for some extreme cases, as I mentioned, like a 7-pick bomb rare. You will never be able to really know if that was a signal or just a very, very, very weird pack that was passed around and you got a strong card quite late from that. I think an important thing to think when we're looking at signals is that they can be based on presence or absence. Like the most common thing will be based on presence because you see a pack 1, pick 5 Combat Professor, that's a good signal for you. Okay, it is still here, so there's a presence of it. That means that at least 4 people in front of me did not think it was the best card or did not draft white. Or it can be based on absence. You get past the pack in pack 2 and you see that the rare is missing. And the absence of that rare is a piece of information for you. It means the person on my left on my right can be having anything literally because they picked a rare, so I have no idea. Some rares are there are rares that are better than any common and any uncommon, so if it was one of those cards I have no information whatsoever, but it is a signal. At least you can expect anything from that side, and you know that they had a rare, so you have to maybe downgrade your expectations of what's happening in the draft. You cannot put too much information on the first couple of cards from this player because the rares are changing the balance quite a lot. And another signal based on absence is the signals we get on the wheel. And these are probably the most important signals that we read in the draft because we open the pack, we know what's inside, we know what didn't come back, and the absence of several cards can mean something to us. And the last point is that this is something I'm sort of introducing, but not introducing. I mean, we all know it, but signals will have range, strength, and specificity. And I'm going to explain what I mean by those things in examples. Image background signifier signified. Now we're going for cyclol. True. Right, so let's give some examples. I hope that this is working. So this is a draft table. The red dot will be us. The direction is as follows. So here's the example of pack 1, pick 2. And I told you earlier that absence can be a piece of information. And in this pack, this is from one of my drafts, basically from 17 lands. I just downloaded the pick 1, pack 2. You can see the rare missing. This is the information, this is the signal we're getting. Someone picked a rare. We have no idea what that rare was, so we actually don't know anything about what happened. We see that the lesson is still here and that it's environmental sciences, so clearly that rare was better than environmental sciences, which means it was probably quite decent, or the person next to us doesn't evaluate environmental sciences. There's also a couple of good cards. There's the Silver Quill Apprentice, Rise of Extus, so we know that even if we pick a white-black card, we're sending unwillingly a signal that white-red is slightly open because Rise of Extus is one of the best cards, even if we pick the Silver Quill Apprentice, and if we pick Rise of Extus, Silver Quill Apprentice is one of the better cards. So whatever we pick from white-black, we're sending a slight signal that white-black is open. So this is what we receive and this is what we're going to be sending. I mean, in the end, I picked the Silver Quill Apprentice from this pick. But what is important is that this first signal from pick 2 has a very small range, and oh yeah, that's what I was supposed to do, laser pointer, because it basically covers only one player, so the range is small. The strength is low because we didn't learn that much. We learned that they picked a rare, so not much important information in there. And the specificity is quite small because, well, we didn't learn anything. This rare could have been anything. It could have been a mythic. We don't know. Right. Now, this is the same pack, but I changed one small thing. And that one small thing is I put Shadrick Silverquill instead of one of the uncommons. Now, this is basically the same situation, but we have a much more different information. One uncommon is missing and Shadrick Silverquill is in. What? Here we have equally small range because we still know a decision made by one player. But it's a quite strong signal because they clearly picked an uncommon over a mythic bomb, which means that either they are forcing something per definition and they're just going to be forcing it, and it's not black-white, or they just have no idea that Shadrick Silverquill is possibly better than any uncommon in the format, including the Igneous Inspiration. Is that how it's called? Hopefully. I'm terrible with card names already, I can tell you that. So it has high strength and it has high specificity because we know that at least one person next to us will 99.9% not draft Silverquill, because if they are doing it, I have no idea what they decided based on their first pick. Right. So let's move a bit further downfield, and this is pick 1, pack 6. So we still have several cards in the deck, and here we have really several strong signals, and these 3 cards are considered signals in, I guess, by most players. Actually, when you look at the data, the signals are only based on those 2 cards. These are the 2 cards that disappear from the pack quite quickly. So we can say that actually red or black or both are reasonably open. We actually, when I looked at the data, guiding voice is not a very strong signal information. I don't know by heart, and unfortunately I can't go to the data because it only works the presentation when I'm in full screen, so I can't do it. Maybe after the presentation we can do a bit of looking in the Excel sheet when I will switch to Arena, and then I can look at the data in the background. Right. But here we have a different situation because the range is large. It's much larger because we know a bit about this player, a bit more about this player, more about this player, and quite a lot about these 2. A bit less about this player because they could have picked anything from that pack. There was a rare there. They could have picked it just like the player that we saw in the pick 2. But this one already had fewer choices and still decided not to pick the heated debate or the flank. This one had even fewer choices and still didn't go for flank or heated debate. And also because they had already 2 picks under their belt, it means that they might have already dedicated themselves to picking some other color combination, so they were just not interested in the flank and the heated debate. That's why it's still here. Because the chance of a booster pack, as you will learn later, a chance of a booster pack when heated debate is not among the top 3 cards perceived by the community as the best is very small, which is already good signal that neither this or this player wanted the flank and the heated debate. So for me, that's a decent strong signal. No, 6.28. Well, that's not enough to be a signal, according to my data that I will show you later. So the signal has a large range because it covers 5 seats. It has a mixed strength because it's much stronger for the players close to you than the players further from you. And it has medium specificity because there was actually 2 different signals that you got there. So we know something about black and something about red, but maybe we don't know that much about the other colors. So this is the same pack, but I just trimmed 2 cards very cheekily. And this is examples from pick 1, pack 8. Now, I on purpose left the flank and heated debate. This is a very rare situation that you will get them so late. But basically at the pick 1, pack 8, you have information from all the players on the table. And you have quite strong information from at least 5 of them. And you still see a heated debate and you still see a flank, which means it's a really strong signal that either people misevaluate cards and completely compared to the rest of the community, or red and black are reasonably open. So, oh yeah, I didn't put the table here, but I mean, this is a very, very wide range signal, and it has it's very strong because you will very rarely see a flank or heated debate at pick 8 in the first pack, especially. Now, the caveats of the drafting signal. So first of all, you should evaluate signals based on the community card value. And I'm going to talk a bit more about it with the examples I've chosen. But I think one of the biggest mistakes that you can make while evaluating signals is assuming that everyone evaluates cards as highly as you do. And this is the case for Guiding Voice. Guiding Voice is definitely a good card. I like it. I like to draft it. I would be happy to pick it highly. I wouldn't mind having it as a pick 2, 3 or whatever. But the community doesn't. Which means that seeing a late Guiding Voice is not really a strong signal because community doesn't value it. So it doesn't tell anything about them drafting or not drafting white before you. I mean, they will value much more highly Expel, because Expel is a card that has a lower alsa than Guiding Voice, I'm pretty sure. And therefore, Expel is a much stronger signal for white and you should treat expel as a stronger signal for white than guiding voice is based on that, because you should not imply your own preference on the rest of the community, because the community sends you the signal, not you. Of course, there will be a mixture of player evaluation styles on your pod, and it's good to know, of course, who you're drafting with. I'm talking here about the people that play Arena, because the data from 17 lands covers the average preference of players in Arena drafts. Yeah. So okay, this is one. By the way, this is one small thing that I should mention. Because I only had the draft data from a couple of weeks ago, maybe even more, maybe 3 weeks ago. They are slightly outdated. I know that Expel, people went down on Expel a bit. So in this presentation, Expel will be graded a bit higher. I think Pairing Books will be graded a bit lower, because we're not trying to talk about specifics of Strixhaven. I think that it's way too late in the format for doing that. It is more generic kind of talk. So basically, we're trying to actually look at what to look at when you're evaluating data signals, and give you a universal skill that you can transfer to the next expansion that will come, rather than to focus on Strixhaven. Although I'm going to give examples with Strixhaven because they're just easier like that. And then this is, I think, the most important caveat the conclusion I came to with looking at this data is basically you should know which cards can give a signal. And then again, we can go back to the guiding voice example. Guiding voice is a signal if you're drafting with fellow grinders. Maybe it will be a stronger signal on Modo, maybe on best of 3, because best of 3 players are on average slightly more invested, so maybe it's a better signal there. But it's not a very good signal in the best of 1 draft. And then the last one, and it goes without saying, just think that randomness has to be taken into account at every time. So even if you see like a late card A and you think that you should not see it, think if you can imagine a pack where that would be actually quite a reasonable order when this card goes quite late. It especially goes for commons in Strixhaven, because you have 1 additional lesson slot and you have 1 additional mystical archive slot, so you can actually have 3 rares in a pack. So if you see something at pick 5, well, maybe there was 3 rares or 3 mythics, even a very strong uncommon, another strong uncommon, and all of a sudden your top tier common becomes like the 6th best card in the pack. It will not happen often, but it will happen. So take that into account, that maybe the signal that you're reading into can be random. And in that case, I would look for confirmation of your signal. So even if you decide to follow the first hint and pick the card that you think might be open because you want to go early into the open color combination, maybe you were half invested in white, you see that red card goes late, you pick the red card and hope for the next ones. Just think about, are there any other signals going through? And in that case, you can actually look at the later packs when normally there wouldn't be much signal, but you can look at them and then think whether there is some kind of trend that red cards are going late. Maybe red is completely open. Right. So to look at the signal strength, I went back to my background, microbiology, and in microbiology very often, I'm not proud of doing those experiments, but I did quite a lot of them. You do survival curves, which means normally you take, if you're lucky, larvae of some kind of moths, and you infect them with different bacteria, and then you grow them over time, and you make a survival curve, which means that you check them every couple of hours and just see if they're dead yet or not. And different bacteria will make them die at different times. And draft is similar, only we are the moths, I guess, and cards are the moths, and we are the time. So basically, as the packs are getting passed across the tables, cards disappear from them. And this is a survival curve of what would happen if we would play 1,000 drafts, and we would just not draft, but remove a random card from the pack. So and then we would check the average values for each card that was played in those drafts. But basically, because we remove card at random, after one pick, one copy would disappear. After two picks, two copies would disappear, and so on until you got like one card left at the end of a given card, if you look at those thousands of drafts. So this is what happens when it's random. But of course, draft is not random. Some cards are more valuable than others, and some cards are absolute rubbish, and they will not be picked very early. So when we look at, and this is again a simulation, a bad card will look like this, that as the picks go on, the card stays in the pack and doesn't disappear because no one wants to pick it early, and then it starts disappearing quite quickly as the last picks go, because then you just pick almost randomly because you don't care about those cards that much. Now it's a completely different situation with a good card, when very quickly that card disappears because it's good. So at pick 5 you almost don't see it. I mean, here we have it at around 10%, and you will almost never see it weeding, and because it's just too powerful, and someone at the table is bound to be playing the color. People, for better or worse, know how to evaluate cards, and the differences between successful and less successful players are small quirks in card evaluation, not the massive ones. So if the card disappears very quickly, seeing it at pack 1, pick 4 is quite meaningful, actually, because already 80% of it, in 80% of the cases, if someone 4 seats upstream from you would have opened that card, it wouldn't get to you. So it's only 20% of the time that it gets there, which means that this is something rare. And it can be rare for different reasons. So this is the fraction of the games when we see the card reaching this pick 4. And it's a mix of signal and ratio. Signal and noise. Problem is we don't know what is the ratio. So some of that 20% will be extremely strong packs when that was a reasonable thing to see that this card arrived to pack 4. Some of those drafts are red is just wide. The color that the card is just wide open. We can't tell that from the signal. This is the randomness part. We know it's a signal, possibly, but we have to count that it might be complete fluke, and based on that, we have to be cautious about reading that signal and maybe look for the follow-throughs. So the one problem in making those survival curves for cards from the 17 lands data is that we only have the draft data from the 17 lands players. So what I did to get those survival curves is an approximation, basically. So I took all the pack 2 pick 1 data and all the pack 3 pick 1 data from 25,000 drafts, I think, if I'm not mistaken. And I calculated the frequency of each mystical archive, mythic rare. This is, I think, mystical archive rares. This is normal rares. These are the uncommons, because the uncommons are clustering together with the mystical archive. They have more or less the same rate of dropping. These are the commons, and these are the common lessons, which have a slightly elevated drop rate. And basically, based on that, I estimated how much of each card will be opened in every pack over those 25 booster packs. If someone opens the pack 4 seats upstream from me, they should have more or less the same amount of commons, uncommons, and rares in their packs. So I did this kind of approximation based on that. And then I can see this pack at the pick 1, pack 4, and I can calculate how many of those cards are still left and how close are they to this benchmark that I calculated from the approximation. And basically dividing one by the other gives me the number of the card, the amount of the card that is still left in the pack. So again, if I see the good card, say, and there was 4,000 of it in the beginning, because that's what I approximated, I will only see 4,000, 20%, 800 of them by pick 4. And the bad card, I still should see roughly 4,000 because almost nothing disappeared. Is it sort of clear? Does it make any sense? And of course, like, this is not a formal lecture. I mean, just shoot away with the questions while I'm going, because if someone is lost at some stage, it will only become more confusing and frustrating. I'd rather spend extra couple of seconds to explain. I never practiced it, so I might be completely rubbish in how I do it. Yeah, sort of like. Right, okay, great to hear that. So without further ado, let's go to some real data. And as I said, the one caveat is that this data is tad outdated, but not completely. But if we plot all the green commons in this case, just to give you an example, this is a very messy graph, and I apologize for that, but this is just to give you a general idea of how those real data graphs looks like. So you can see that here there were a couple of the points that were over 100%. This is based on the fact that my approximation was the average value for commons, and of course there will be a slight variance in that. So there might be some packs that some subsets of packs that will have slightly more than the average, some subset of packs that will have slightly less, but they were actually, I think that the maximum I had was like 103%. So actually it's quite a narrow range using this approximation if I have 25,000 drafts to approximate from. But you can see that some cards are behaving very similarly to the bad cards that I showed you in this theoretical example. Some cards are behaving like pretty good cards, not as good as the one that I showed on the example, but that's a characteristic of the green color. And some of them are going exactly like a random card would do, almost in a straight line from the beginning to the end. Some of them disappear, maybe slightly slower in the beginning, and then they just go linearly down. Yeah, I mean, it's not dying out like crazy. You know what's dying out like crazy? Shadrick Silverquill, when in pack 1, in 99.6% of the packs, it's picked as pick 1. That's why I gave it as the example. It's the most extreme one. It's, I think that from this 25,000 drafts, I've seen only 3 times that Silverquill was past the pick one, pack one, pick one. So that's dying out is crazy, and that's a strong signal. But this one is a decent signal, but it's not super strong. Now, the important thing I would focus on is the shape of the curve. And what I figured out when I was analyzing this data is that basically, if you draw this survival curve, the random one that I did in the beginning, the one that goes just completely straight, everything below it is some sort of a signal. I mean, yellow one, field trip here, it's a signal, not a very strong one, but it is a signal because it goes slightly below this kind of random variation, which means it will generate some information in the area where we want the information. And of course, the mage duel will be much stronger signal because it's valued much more higher than by the players. I actually have to look at my own data, but I think I almost never picked mage duel because of that, because I guess I never went into the deck that could utilize it super efficiently, and I played green mainly in combination with black. So because it's valued by the society as highly, I rarely pick it. So that's what I noticed. But okay, this is a chaotic draft, and I don't want to show you all this type of graph for every single color combination because it wouldn't be useful. So I trimmed them into the cards that I see as moderate to strong signals in terms of commons. And yeah, change the color scheme because it's a nicer color scheme, and I didn't want to play with that one because that was a pain. But yes, you're exactly right. You were probably 1 minute before. 1 minute before I actually started the slide, people know what I'm talking about. So I guess it's not super fresh. But exactly, field trip, mage duel, and professor of zoomancy seem to be the strongest signals in green. And of course, mage duel being the strongest signal at that time because it has the biggest delta. It has the biggest drop off in the early stages, and because of that, it being still there at pick 6 at 35% probably will be a stronger signal than Professor of Zoomancy, which would be probably 45%. So in black, actually, the interesting part was that the only really strong signal was Mage Hunter's Onslaught. It's a pretty strong one. I think it's slightly stronger than Mage's Duel was in green. But basically that means that black commons, you shouldn't put too much weight when you're seeing them late, because they just don't disappear from the packs that fast, and that doesn't have to mean anything really. Wash my throat a bit. Oh god, this didn't change. Okay, just ignore what you're seeing here, because this is Combat Professor, this is Expel. I changed that graph 3 times and it always went back to this bad labeling. But no, it's not. Yeah. There you go. This is Combat Professor. It's a much stronger signal. But what I wanted to show here is the Expel, which is still a decent signal, even though probably, if my guess would be right, most of you don't value it super highly. But the community does, and you cannot ignore that, because in the end you're drafting with the community, not with yourself and your own clones. So yeah, think about it like that. God, it's awful. I mean, I should always triple check my slides, because double checking clearly is not enough. Right. But Combat Professor is a decent signal for a common, so worth to notice those late professors can mean something. And here we come, the strongest common signal, because it is the most big common, and it is the heated debate. So from the example that I showed you in my example, there was still a heated debate at pick 6. This will only happen 20% of the time, which means it's a twice stronger signal than the Professor of Zoomancy, Mage Hunter's Onslaught, and Mage's Duel were. So seeing late heated debate is a good indication that something might be going on with red. But of course you have to think, maybe there was the Igneous Inspiration and maybe some rare in red in the pack, and because of that heated debate went slightly further. Always think about confirmation of your signal, even though I think it's not, if you're in a situation where pivoting to red would be a good idea, I think it's not a bad idea to pick it early, and rather than not pick it and then regret in the later stage of the game. So yeah, this is the heated debate is the wow strong signal, yeah. And here we have another pair, and I think that those have flipped since then. So this is based on probably outdated data, but outdated data, nice one. But here I put Frost Trickster. It was actually a pretty strong signal. Again, same level as Mage Hunter's Onslaught and Mage's Duel. But Bury in Books was barely a signal, because community didn't value it. Now that has since changed, and I think that Bury is now the highest pick common in blue. So the curve right now probably looks like this. And well, I hope that the next slide is what I think it is, because then, and I think that it is the same shape, because I actually tried to test whether we can estimate the shape of this curve without going through the hullabaloo of estimating the number of cards in the booster, looking at 25,000 drafts, because ain't nobody got time for that. Yeah, exactly, Diego. The range is a quite important takeaway, I think, from this stream. But okay, so the next couple of slides are going to be focusing on pick 1, pack 6, and this is not written in stone or anything. I just wanted to showcase pick 1, pack 6 as a good spot to start looking at signals early based on the data information. And hopefully I can convince you that pick 1, pack 6 is actually a decent spot. First of all, as Diego said, it's because of the range, because you already covered 5 players, even though those first 2 might be quite weak signals depending on what you still see in the pack. So don't, put too much weight on what those people have picked, because there is, as I said, potentially 3 mythic rares in the pack, but you can actually start looking at those 3 with quite some good confidence. And most of the time, especially in the 10 color combination formats, not this one is a bit an oddball because you only have 5 colleges, but in a 10 combination of colors, if you pick one and someone somewhere here picks the same combination, you still have quite a decent flow of cards from both sides. And especially if you go for a strong card combination and you know that you're not really challenged from this side, which we will get the packs twice, you're putting yourself in a good position to be to have a decent deck, strong on playables. If you're just a couple of lucky open rares, even here and here, from getting a decent deck with a couple of bombs. But okay, so first things first. ALSA, it's the measure from 17 lands, and obviously every single piece of data that we're looking at is based on 17 lands, because 17 lands is the truth, or at least it tries to uncover the truth that we were ignoring for some time. So average last seen as, it means you make the statistics of each card and you see when the 17 lands users saw the cards last in the booster. And last, it means that basically if you open it and then you see it again as a pick 1, pack 1, pick 9, you last saw it as a pick 9, not as a pick 1. So you don't take the 1 into the statistics, you take the 9. So basically, the higher the number, the later you see the card. Like the cards that have an average ALSA over 8 will be wheeling almost all the time. These are the the chaff, the stuff that doesn't even end up in the deck 99% of the time. The cards that are picked earlier, these are probably, most of them are rares and then mythics and maybe a couple of like ultra competitive uncommons. You almost never see them outside of pick 1 and pick 2 and maybe pick 3. And this is the middle range. So these are like probably good uncommons and very good commons. These are probably like medium quality uncommons and good commons. And these are the sort of filler style commons that you can pick up later. And based on that, I plotted them against the survival rate at exactly pick 1, pack 6, because I'm going to focus on this poor pick 1, pack 6. And these cards don't correlate very well. It's a sort of sigmoidal curve, which means it's a sort of like an S-shaped. S, not ass. But from around ALSA of 2.53, we see quite a good linear agreement. I think that, if I had the ALSAs that were more concurrent with the data I took from the draft, it would be even narrower in terms of how well it correlates. Which means that we don't have to go through the hustle of doing all those curves and measuring how quickly does a card disappear, because ALSA will give us a very, very good estimate of how it happens. So instead of looking at the curves, which you won't have access to during the draft, you can actually look at the ALSA values from 17 lands and or even know by heart several cards that will be in the range where you want them. So that Heated Debate is probably around 3.5, so it will be somewhere here, which means, and this one disappears rather quickly, which means that it will have a very low survivor at pick 1, pack 6, probably around 20% or 15%, right? And based on the how those curves look like, I sort of estimate the signal zone, which means that if the card at pick 6 is at 40%, this is a relatively strong signal in a draft. And basically, only cards that have an ALSA under 5 will have that 40% or less at pick 1, pick 6. So ALSA under 5 is basically your proxy form for a card that gives a good signal at pick 6, which is something useful to know. Okay, sorry, I'm going to catch up on the chat for a second, but If I understand well, it seems to confirm the rule of thumb of the drafting the hard way article. Thanks for putting Ben Stark intuition into data. Well, it still doesn't prove that following the signal is going to be beneficial. It just sort of helps you to figure out what the signal is. I hope it does. Okay, yeah. In this data, it's slightly different. Carva. I think in this data, igneous inspiration was a bit lower, but it's based on time. So, but yeah, I mean, it's more or less in the zone. I think that yeah. Uh, Thank you, Hululu, for giving me more work. I'm sure I'm going to arrive at that stage at some point, but today I just wanted to do the introductory stuff and looking at the basics. It is true that the most important thing is that what I want to do later is how reliable are signals. So basically, trying to see those 20% of the situations when at pick one, pack one, pick six, you see a heated debate, and try to follow up those drafts and see, did you see the red cards in those drafts at much higher rate than average, and what is that rate? But I still didn't do it today because I have to, I'm a content creator now. I have to trickle down the content to the people, so I have actually stuff to do. Maybe I'll just start inventing new theories just to have something to say, and then of course do an annual recap episode. But in the serious matters of signal reading, I think that the magic number is also 5, basically. These are the cards that will give a decent signal at pick 1, pack 6, which covers enough of the table to give you information and will happen frequently enough for you to actually get those signals a lot in your games. Because again, as I said, the fact that pick 1, pack 2, Shadebrick Silver Quill is a strong signal is nice. The fact that pick 1, pack 6, let's invent a rare here. I don't know even a single rare from that set. Let's say a sparring regimen at pick 1, pack 6, pack 1, pick 6 would be a very strong signal. But probably in 25,000 drafts, you will see sparring regimen as pick 6 once. How many drafts do you play per each expansion? Some of you may be into their hundreds. Some of you may be in their 50s. You probably will never see that signal. So, I mean, knowing that it's a strong signal is pretty useless for you because you will never see it. So it's a very much theoretical signal. I'm not holding my breath. I can't because I would probably faint in front of this lovely audience. So these cards are not only strong enough signals, but will happen frequently enough for you to actually get something out of it and to be practically applicable. Because, if you see a heated debate as a pick 6 in the first booster, 20% of the time, if you play 10 drafts, you might see it twice. So you might twice get this kind of signal, which means that you can practically, do something with it. So this slide is a bit about noise at pack 1, pick 6. And here I did some combinatory stats, basically. And I calculated what are the odds that there is X or more cards with a lower alpha than heated debate in a pack. So basically, this means that there is an 80% of chance that in your booster pack that you open, there is one card that has a lower alpha, and of course, in this case, lower means better. There is a card with lower alpha, so it's quite reasonable for someone to pick it because if it has a lower alpha, it's probably a better card, or at least it's evaluated higher than heated debate by the general community. So if you see a heated debate as a pick 1, pack 2, well, 80% of the time you will see it because there was something better in the pack, or 80% of the time there was something better in the pack. Maybe, some people might misevaluate or whatever. And you still see 91% of the time you see that heated debate survives the first pick. So people maybe pick something else that was actually lower evaluated, actually quite more frequently than they possibly should based on the strength of the heated debate. But personal preferences come into play. Now, there is only 30% chance that there are two cards that have a lower alsa than heated debate in the pack. So that will happen quite rarely, but it will still happen quite reasonably frequently. So if you see heated debate as pick 3, you can assume that 3 out of 10 drafts there were just two better cards. 3 out of 10 boosters, there were just two cards that were better evaluated by the community than the heated debate. And you see 63% of the heated debate being passed. So that's already starting to become a signal if you see it, because that means that you see more heated debates than would be if people were just picking it based on alsa. So this is the sort of size of the signal. Now at pick 4, you have only 5% chance that in the booster there will be 3 cards or more stronger than heated debate, and you see 45% of the heated debate still goes to the pack 1, pick 4, which means that here you have a much higher signal. It's actually quite strong signal, but the problem with that signal is, of course, that it still can be, there still can be 2 cards that are better, so you only get 1 card information. That's already 30%, or 1 card that was better, so you only get 2 seats information based on that. So even though there is quite a signal there, it might be muddled by the fact that there were better cards than heated debate in the pack. And then we go, like, there's almost 0 chance of having 4 cards better evaluated higher than heated debate in the pack, and you still see 32% of it on pick 5. And there is a chance. I made some packs that had 3 top uncommons, a mythical archive card, mascot interception, and some kind of a powerful rare in it. So it technically is possible, but the chance of that is, I think, 0.001% that there will be a card when there are 5 cards better than, or evaluated higher than heated debate in the pack. But we still see 17.9. And that means that, here, even if you assume that there were 2 cards better than it, you still get an information from 3 players that they picked a theoretically weaker card, evaluated lower by the community in general, over the heated debate, which means that they might have been invested in other color combinations and red is getting passed. So basically, that's why I think this is a good spot for starting to read information, because these packs where a heated debate was second best or third best card in the pack don't muddle the information too much here, because we already have 3 other players that saw weaker cards and picked them over the heated debate. So you get actually a good chunk of information, but it will happen reasonably frequently because you will have 18% of the time that kind of situation. So as I said, twice in 10 drafts, which is useful to know, because if you know that for many cards you will get it much more frequently, you will probably get a signal in every draft on this pick 1, pack 6. Right. So this is you see, I mean, this is the thing that I think that people that play Magic understand math, even though sometimes they don't know that they do, because lots of Magic is intuitive. Honestly, I'm not a good mathematician. I'm not like I work with people in science that are super good in stats, and then they figure things out. I use this sort of like natural maths, so I try to imagine situations. I always use, like, to this day, whenever I design an experiment, I'm thinking like red ball, black ball in the box, let's see what happens out of that. And based on the imagination, I can come up with some kind of methods, and I very often come up with my own methods because I don't know the right ones. So but they do work, and they do confer what I want to do, and then later I check it with my math savvy people, and they will correct here and there. Because they know the formal ways of doing it. But in the end, I managed to figure out the stuff just by imagining it and not being afraid of doing maths. Because I think that lots of people in humanities were just scarred from maths by bad maths teachers. It might have happened. But I think that most of the Magic people do understand maths on an intuitive level, because we read those signals. We understand why heated debate as pick one, pack six is pack one, pick six. I will never learn that. I will just continue like that till the end of my days. Why pack one, pick six is an important signal, even though you don't know the maths behind it, but you sort of intuitively can imagine that. Especially with practice, it comes much easier. But anyway, back to the Maritim. Here I just put a couple of the uncommons, and as I said, they are based on the not the freshest data, but you can probably look at the ALSA values, and you can compare them. There is one thing that I should mention, and that might come back to physicists. Physicists are scary, I can tell you that. Us biologists, we are always afraid of physicists, because at least they claim they know biology better than us most of the time. And also, I mean, some of the physicists are the best biologists. Some of the physicists are best at telling that they're best biologists. Anyway, enough of the digressions. So one small caveat that is maybe important to know, and that maybe go to the discrepancy between ALSA and the values that I have here that Carva mentioned. The curves for pack 1 and pack 2 and pack 3 look slightly different. And it makes sense, because lots of players in pack 1 will focus on sheer power, and in pack 2 and pack 3 they will go for synergy, and they will pass better cards because they will pick a synergistic piece for their deck. So some good cards will go slightly later. Like I told you that 99.6% of Shadrick Silverquill is disappearing in pick 1, pack 1, but it's not the same when you look at the pack 2 and pack 3 data. The Shadricks will go a bit further down the table, and you can get it pick 4 sometimes. So there is a difference between looking at the pick 1, pack 6 and the pack 1 and pack 2 and pack 3. But okay, anyway, here are the uncommons, and since the data is slightly outdated, you shouldn't put too much weight on those, but they still, I think, are roughly along those lines. What I wanted to draw your attention to, and then maybe when you think about the cards, the commons that we looked before, it will make sense. Igneous Inspiration, Eliminate, Mortality Spear, Flunk, Closing Statement, Devouring Tendrils. This is the best common just as a benchmark, but it's heated debate, of course, is the best common. When you think about the only black card that I considered as a signal giver was Mage Hunter's Onslaught. Was it Mage something's Onslaught? Whatever, the black removal. Then the green was also a removal card in terms of what was picked the most. So it looks to me that good removal is the strongest signal card, and probably it's because players of all ability value removal relatively highly. Even if some good players will maybe put a lower weight on the removal, they will still pick it because they know it's essential to have interaction. But as a rule of thumb, look at late removal as a good potential for signals. Okay? And another thing, Mortality Spear will give a slightly different signal than Eliminate. And it's twofold different. Like, first of all, Mortality Spear is a black-green card, so it will give you more information about whether someone is specifically drafting Witherbloom around you. It would be difficult to imagine that a Witherbloom player would just pass Mortality Spear around unless there was some really, really good reason to do it. So if you see it at pick 6, you probably know that the next 3 players in front of you don't draft Witherbloom. But it doesn't give you much information about whether they draft black or whether they draft green. I mean, some people might pick it for a splash and it would not be visible, so there is a slight signal there that they might not be drafting green, but it's not as specific as seeing, let's say, a flunk. A flunk tells us at pick 6 that probably the 3 people in front of us are not in black. So we have it clear, although we don't know anything about the second color that we're drafting in this particular draft. Also, confidence intervals for a more complex card is larger. Okay, yeah, maybe. It's also, for some For small alsas, the variance is pretty small because they're almost always disappearing in the pick one. So that's the one thing. And for some complicated cards that are evaluated very differently by different players. So my experience is that players that evaluate cards differently do it because they don't want to pick them early anyway. They evaluate the card highly, mainly because they know that the card is going to be available because the alpha is high. So if I like Reconstruct History, and I do like Reconstruct History, I think it's a great card, I'm still not going to pick it early because I don't need to. If I have it as a pick 1, pack 2, I have a good 60% chance that it will wheel as a pick 1, pack 10, so I'm not going to pick it early, which will mean that I won't change ALSA like that, and other people that value it might not change the ALSA because they sort of parasitize the fact that lots of the community is undervaluing this card. Anyway, the uncommons are just given to you because uncommons are probably much stronger signals than commons, and you should think about it. So this is the strongest signal common here debate. These are stronger signals, but they will happen more rarely. But it's good to know that they are because 10% is still good. It's 1 every 10 drafts. 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 Probably these things will not happen in the same draft. So by knowing these 7-8 cards, you will have one signal every probably 2 drafts from those cards. So useful to know. And now a bit of the practical approach. As I said, I was a fan of 17 lands from early on, and because of me being an almost religious fan and starting to write about bot draft strategies on my then not followed Twitter, I started collaborating with the guys. So I'm going to advertise you the new feature that 17 Lands introduced, and that's basically a live stream draft. So basically, most of you, I assume, used 17 Lands. If you don't, please do, because it's awesome. If you do, you have the page where you have all your draft statistics. And what some of you might not know is that right now you can go on that page during the draft, click on the draft that you're currently drafting, and the page will be updated live. It's a very useful feature because, except for the bloody pack 1, pick 1 that Arena is still not logging, it's not 17 Lands' fault that we don't have it, it just doesn't exist in the draft log. But except for that, from pack 1, pick 2, you can follow the composition of the booster, and you can look at what was in it. But more importantly, at pack 1, pick 10, it will also tell you what didn't wheel. So you have this like without too much hassle. Of course, check the Patreon, subscribe, pay, give money, shower them with money. They deserve it. I'm not getting paid a penny out of it, so I'm totally. Oh, I'm getting paid in data, which is like the silliest currency, but. Oh, okay. Hululu actually is one of the people. Oh, Max Windiff, aka Hululu, is one of the people responsible for coding. But yeah, if you run it as in the background, you can just like quickly check when you have a pick and just like, okay, what's missing? Tick, 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 tick. This is missing. There you read your signals from the later pack. I totally didn't focus on those during this stream, but these signals are also important. It's just that they're more straightforward and I need to have something for later, obviously. But when you do it, you can actually hover over a card and you can see the ALSA value here called average pick. And basically, this is the number. If it's under 5 and you're at pick 6, you know, okay, this card is probably a signal. That's a super straightforward way of doing it without getting involved in any complicated maths. So by all means, start using it. And I think it's not a bad idea. Like here at pick 3, this is a strong signal actually, because Dragon's Guard Elite is a very highly picked card. So seeing it at 3 is a strong signal, but it covers a low amount of the players. So but I just gave it as as a good indication that look, you can just hover over the card, check, and after some time you will just probably memorize. And I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Max Windiff, but these are the values for the given day. So actually you have a most up-to-date information about the metagame. Yeah. Right. So this is more or less what I wanted to present, and I still have probably 15 slides, but they will be short one. It's basically a summary and a couple of take-home messages that I really wanted to hammer, and we can go through them in a reasonable speed. So first of all, signals are based on how the general population evaluates the cards, not how you evaluate them, and keep that in mind. You have to keep in mind that people love their expels, and an expel is a good signal for white. Also, you have to know that even if you don't want an expel, if you're passing it, they might think that white is open. So that's a very unfortunate situation, and I did. Okay, last few days. At least it should be a relatively recent metric than the one that you get from highlighting a card. So sometimes I pick an expel just not to give a signal that white is open when I want to really usurp the white and make a statement. And I know that people don't read signals, but I sometimes do it. I don't know how much of a trap it is. I won't do it when I have a very good thing for taking for my deck, but I will do it when I have a meh pack and there is still an expel in it. I'll just pluck it just not to give any kind of information away. Second, when there is signal, there is noise. I mean, I was talking a lot about signals, but you have to keep in mind that a large percentage of what you consider a signal may be noise and an illusion based on different evaluation, based on super strong packs. So always look for confirmation. Always try to see, is there a follow-up? Like I picked pack 1, pick 6, heated debate. Was there something I was not supposed to see in pack 7, also red? That would be a strong signal that maybe the red is open. Was there nothing in the next couple of packs? Well, you clearly are not going to pick a red card then. You just made a speculative pick for red, and maybe it didn't work. You didn't lose that much, I guess. But keep in mind that noise will be right. Sorry, I'm just going to check on the chat. No. You can actually go on 17 Lands metagame analysis. I think it's the analytic tab of the website, and there you have daily levels, daily alsas for each card, and they are quite stable. They might shift by 0.2 or something if the card is dynamically changing its evaluation, but it's not going to be a massive change. You know, the point is we are collecting data based on massive amounts of drafts. So because of that, the variance is small, and day-to-day variance is also really small because people don't change overnight, as we all know. So be wary of that noise, and you know, don't treat signal as a solid information. Treat it as a speculative information. Right. Another one. Signals have strength. So how unlikely it is to see the card at this particular moment, and strength can vary, of course. I mean, seeing a card that wheels 50% of the time, wheeling is not something we will be surprised, but seeing heated debate at pick 6 when we know that it happens under 20% of the time is a strong information. There's the range, so how many seats do they cover, and you have to think that there is two parts of that story. That there is one range that, you know, in pick 6 it covers 5 seats, but it doesn't cover them equally. I mean, I guess the first 2 seats, the person that opened the booster and the person next to them, convey much less information because they might have had good rares, good uncommons to pick. But the next 3 are probably a stronger information because the pack should be slightly depleted at pick 3. And there's the specificity. So basically, does the information you get point to a color pair, to a rarity that's missing, to on the wheel it can sort of give mixed information about different colors in a bit, or like if you see something surprising. So the specificity of information of the signal will be something that you should also take into account. Signals in pick 2 and pick 3 can be strong, but they cover little range, so they are not as useful as you may think. I mean, they still convey quite a strong information, but it refers only to maybe 1, maybe 2 players. So make sure you know that. It can be still a valuable information because it's nice when you know that your neighbor is not drafting green, most likely because they passed an absurd green bomb. Now, signals in pick 8 to 10 have an incredible range because they cover the whole table, but you will see strong signals from them rarely. So you shouldn't count on them happening too often. And because of that, their usefulness is lower. Because as I mentioned, if something happens once every 1,000 drafts, it's useful. But I guess then it's so obvious that you don't need any kind of theory to figure it out. Now, signals in pick 1, pack 1, pick 4 to 7 have a solid range. And if you know which cards to use as benchmarks, can be pretty strong. And that's where I would focus on having the looking at the signals, because you have a combination of signals that are predictably going to happen because they happen, 15% of the time, 20% of the time, are relatively strong because you know that at least they cover 4-5 players, and 3 of them with a good conviction that something is happening there. But at the same time, so basically it's a combination of solid signal strength and sufficient range. And cards with ALSA under 5 will give you a decent signal from pick 1 to pack 5 onwards. The lower the lower the ALSA, the stronger the signal, but also the rarer it will happen. Oh, what a beautiful sentence. I'm so proud of myself not being able to write a coherent sentence, even though I tried to reduce my writing to the minimum in this presentation. I still managed to create this monstrosity. But the lower the ALSA, the stronger the signal, but of course it will happen rarer. So, there's always a trade-off. Strong signal, rarer. Weaker signal, more common, but less telling. That's what we get. Not many common send reliably strong signals. And this is something to really think about. And especially, I think one category of cards that is people very often read into is campuses. Campuses. Campuses are really poor in terms of sending signals. Their ALSA is around 8, 9, I think. So people think, oh, well, the campus is still here, so maybe Witherbloom is open. And I think that this is not the right way of going around it. Even if it's late in the pack, it will happen quite frequently that the campus is still going to be there. So don't read too many common-based signals because they're just not strong enough and they might confuse you more than give you information. Just don't. Multiple signals pointing to the same conclusion, for example, red is being open, mean much more than one signal, because the confirmation is this double whammy. And very often I find myself in a draft that I see a signal, I ignore it, I see a second one and I start getting angry, and then I'm like, if only I picked this first card, I could have pivoted now. But now the guy on my the person on my right is picked the strong signal, so I'm just going to pivot just to be cut off in the next pack? No. So I think that it's a very reasonable strategy to look at the speculative picks when you see a strong signal. Well, Diogo, your yesterday's or 2 days ago draft was quite an inspiration for that conclusion for me, because I would have probably done similar things that you did, and would have ended equally frustrated by not abusing the fact that white was so atrociously open later. But it would be nice for you maybe sometimes to try to pick that signal, see what happens. Worst case scenario, you lose one pick. You are almost guaranteed to make playables in the current draft format, so it shouldn't be a big an issue. But then, if you see a second one, you are in a perfect spot of pivoting. And the person that is sitting on your left is the one that is getting, on your right is the one that is getting annoyed that they just passed a strong signal, and now for sure the person on their right, on their left, went on that bandwagon, and they will say, oh, damn it. So yeah, useful to do that. And multiple signals are really much stronger, because it's very unlikely that you will get 2 signals that are just random noise, especially that the second one comes later, which means it's stronger because it's later, so it covers more of the field. Having 17 lands draft stream open in the background lets you check ALSA cards in the pack quickly and see what didn't wheel. So I would strongly advise doing that when you're drafting. The stream feature I think is awesome, although it is, especially when you play on the full screen, it might become a bit dirty to go between the windows, but you can easily draft in the small window. Or you can have a Mac like me and not even have an ability to draft to play Arena on full screen. So yay, go Mac. Anyway, you can just play the draft in the window mode and then go to full screen when you're playing, when that doesn't matter for you. But I would strongly advise to use that feature because how often do you think, oh God, what was in that pack? What didn't wheel? And this one gives you a very quick answer. It's got, correct me again if I'm wrong, Max Windiff, aka Hululu. I think it's like 5 seconds delay, so you have plenty of time to analyze what's happening. Of course, you have to have 17 lands running in the background in that case. Yeah. Okay, that's it. So yeah, I would like to really thank 17 lands team for tons of support and getting me the data that I need so I can parasitize it shamelessly. And really, so the viral misnomer, who is the Robert, who is the creator of 17 lands, you can find him on Twitter at 17 lands. There is Hululu, who is not self-proclaimed, but proclaimed by acclamation by everyone else, a genius who figured out how the logs function and how to get the game replay functionality in 17 lands. You can find him on MaxWinDiff on Twitter as well. There is Hitchiflav, our dev, who is also a very important piece of the team, and Grant Wu, who you can find on Grant Wu. Just type it. It's always good to follow those guys, even if only for showing some gratitude for this awesome software. And I would like to extend a big thank you for Diogo Chapinto, who spent countless hours, and I counted them. There were 4 of them. That's countless. That's half a day's work to actually let me set up my OBS and actually allow me to stream, because I was way too thick to figure it out myself.